What's going on, everybody? So this is going to be another installment of my Mind of a Meathead series, if that's what you want to call it. I think I'm going to start doing these in video format now instead of written word, because I think that I can articulate my thoughts a little bit better and a little bit more clear through voice than I can through written word on an Instagram post. So today's topic that I want to cover a little bit more in depth is playing to your strengths as a physique athlete. And this can mean a couple different things, and I'm going to cover this from a couple different angles, just so that we can kind of get a better understanding on the points that I'm trying to get across here. So first things first, why is this important? Why is it important to play to our strengths as a physique athlete? Or if you're a coach, how do you play to the strengths of your clients? So the number one goal in a bodybuilding competition is, obviously, besides winning, but the way that you go about that is by standing out to the judges. There has to be something about you that sets you apart from everybody else in the lineup, okay? In my opinion, the most effective and efficient way for you to do this is to play to your personal strengths or your client's strengths, so that you can really highlight what makes that physique unique from all the other ones. And instead of trying to present a physique that you don't accurately represent, I think it's very important that you understand what it is that your physique represents, or the physique that your client represents, and then you try to play to those strengths as best as you can. So how do we go about this? In my personal opinion, every physique has something about it physically that is very unique to it, and not necessarily unique as in nobody else on the planet has that physique, but there seems to be natural tendencies that your physiques want to go to. I'm going to give myself as a personal example here. So my personal physical genetic gift is that I seem to have a pretty wide clavicle, and my shoulders are pretty broad. Like I have pretty wide and broad shoulders. It's actually funny. I remember being in like middle school playing football and having people come up to me in public and ask, like adults, like my dad's friends, this has happened multiple times. People ask me, do you play football? And I would say, yeah. And they would say, I can tell because you have super wide shoulders. And I was not like a physical specimen in high school. I was a fat offensive and defensive lineman, but I still had genetically broad shoulders. My dad has very broad shoulders. My grandfather has very broad shoulders. So that's a genetic trait that I have. That's a gift to me. That's not something that I necessarily have to work for. That's something that is genetically already written in my cards. So what does that mean in the bodybuilding world? In the bodybuilding world, people that have wide clavicles and really broad shoulders tend to present the illusion that they're wider than what they really are. The width of the clavicle really accentuates the V-taper of their waist and makes you look a lot wider than what you really are. So what does it mean for me to play to my strengths when I keep that into consideration? Well, you're going to have to take a look at my training programming to be able to fully understand this. But if you were to scroll through my Instagram, because I log all my training sessions on my Instagram, you'll see that the amount of shoulder work that I do, direct like delt work, is actually pretty low compared to most people. And the reason for that is just because genetically, it seems that my body is already naturally broad in the shoulders. So that's not necessarily something that I have to work super hard for. Now, keeping in mind that I have really broad shoulders and thinking about playing to my strengths, I know that my body naturally wants to be wide. So I think I'm not going to try and fight that. I'm going to try to accentuate that. I'm going to try to make myself as wide as fucking possible. Because if I can just make myself obnoxiously wide, when I step on stage, that's going to be something that sets me apart from my competition. That's the thought process, at least. We're going to have to see how it actually plays out in practice. But as for now, that's the thought process. And so how do I accentuate that? Well, if you go and you look at my training programming, you will see that the majority of my training volume and the majority of my training intensity techniques, like rest pause sets, drop sets, all of those things, are focused on three muscle groups: my quads, my lats, and my traps. Why did I pick those three exercises specifically? So I specifically chose the quads and the lats because aside from your side delts and your clavicle width, your quads and your lats are the other two muscles that, in my opinion, really separate your width apart. If there were any muscles that you could hypertrophy to specifically make yourself wider, it would be your quads, your quad sweep, but mainly just the whole quad. It would be your lats, and it would be your side delts. I refer to these as the silhouette muscle groups. If you were to take somebody and you couldn't see the actual details of their physique, you just saw their shadow and you saw the silhouette that it cast, it would be the quad sweep, the lats, and the side delts that really separate and really highlight a wide physique. So I accentuate that within my training by trying to improve my lats and my quads to be as crazy as they can be, because my delts are already going to be naturally pretty good. From what it seems, maybe 5 years from now I may watch this and they may be fucking garbage, who knows. But I'm trying to accentuate my natural God-given genetic gift by making the other muscles that will further highlight that strength even better, so that the strength becomes even stronger than what it already is. And then hopefully in theory that's going to be something that helps me stand out from my competition as I go through my competing career. And then I also brought up the traps. Now, why did I bring up the traps? Because I think it's important to understand that with every genetic gift, that same genetic gift can also bring a weakness. In the example of wide clavicles and side delts, from what I see from people on stage that seem to have really wide clavicles, one of the problems with having a naturally wide clavicle is I think that it makes your traps look small, and this would make common sense. Obviously, your traps originate up here on your clavicle, and then they insert like up towards the neck. So if you were to take somebody's shoulder blade clavicle and stretch it wider, the muscle here would stretch wider and it wouldn't like stick up as much. This is really elementary how I'm describing it. But the genetic strength of having a wide clavicle can kind of give an appearance that your traps are not as big as they really are. Now, why is that a problem? Because I think the traps are a very important muscle in a lot of poses, specifically the most muscular, rear lat, rear double bi. If you have crazy traps, like that's gonna stick out, especially the crab most muscular. I think one of the things that you need to have in order to be able to effectively hit a crab most muscular is you just need to have some ridiculous traps, because that's gonna be a huge focal point of the pose. So I acknowledge that weakness, that my natural clavicle width is going to make my traps appear smaller. So I also have shuttled a lot of my training volume and a lot of my intensity techniques into my traps in an attempt to try and mitigate that problem. And the final way that I want to mention bringing up playing to your strengths is how playing to your strengths relates to the peak and how you're going to peak yourself for the show. This is commonly referred to as either playing the conditioning game or playing the size game, whether you're going to try and come in, a little bit flat but dry and detailed as fuck, or whether you're going to try and come in a little bit watery and a little bit less detailed, but you're going to come in big and full and round. So I want to make a caveat real quick that I really only think that this is applicable at the high level national scene, or really kind of the professional level. From my personal experience and from what I've seen, it seems that like amateur level shows are pretty much entirely a conditioning game. Usually whoever comes in the craziest condition is going to win. But as we've seen from national and especially the professional level shows, it isn't always the most conditioned, and it isn't always the biggest and most full athlete. It seems to be up in the air. And I think that this comes down to the judging panels. Ultimately, different judging panels are going to want to see different things. And I'm not going to try and act like I know what's going on at the national, the professional level, because I absolutely don't. But I still kind of want to give my 2 cents on it. I think we see a lot of times, more so at the professional level, that we see athletes whose bodies want to be big and full and round try to be detailed, or athletes who are naturally really conditioned and detailed try to play the size game, and that almost never works out for them. In a situation like that, it's really hard to say what to hypothetically do, but I still think that it's best to kind of stick to your guns and play to your genetic strengths. And unfortunately, at that point, you're just going to kind of have to accept what the result is. For example, if you're a detail conditioning guy and the judges are looking for size, I still kind of think it's best to play the detail and conditioning game and just kind of accept the fact that it's not going to be a good show. For professionals, that could influence how they set up their schedule, their season. You know, how they pick their shows is based on the judging panel. Again, I'm not involved in the professional scene at all, so I'm not going to act like I know what's going on. I'm just trying to give my 2 cents on this particular topic. Those are just kind of my 2 cents on what it means to play to your strengths as a physique athlete, and kind of how you can reframe your way of thinking potentially to help accentuate what makes you good and what separates you from the pack and what's going to help make you stand out from the competition. So if you guys like it, then feel free to like it, share it around. Make sure to follow for more content, and as always, take care.